She's probably right. So Peter removed his pinny and kicked off his shoes before relaxing in front of the TV for a while before bedtime. So, is Mrs. Peters going to domesticate Mike? He asked. It certainly seems that way, his mother replied. I was thinking of suggesting he spend a day or two here, but figured I'd run it by you first, she added. Charlie wasn't keen on having one of his school friends spend all day following him around whilst he works through his chores. He'd much rather keep the two separate, and reiterates just how mortified he was when Mike and his mother called this morning. Well, people are bound to call round Charlie. You always answer the door to the postman. Yeah, if it's not the usual postman, they just stare at me or snigger. Did Michael snigger? No. Charlie replied, before claiming that Mike did look worried, probably because he knows what his mother's got in mind. Which is all the more reason why you could help him to adapt, his mother replied. Plus, it's not just demonstrating how to be meticulous and thorough, you could also show him how to do his makeup and shave his legs, things like that. I'm not gonna shave his legs. I mean, just show him how, his mother chuckled. Charles suggested that Mike's mother should be the one teaching him about makeup, but Francine never wears makeup. Yeah, but she'll know how. Charles reckoned. You don't wear it very often, but you still manage to teach me, he added. Yes, but Francine's not old-fashioned like me. I don't think she's ever worn makeup, and I've never seen her wearing a skirt or dress. What about Mrs. Peters? Charles asked. He does the housework, Mike can learn from him. Well, that's part of Francine's problem. Frank's very willing but is not very able, so she wants to get Michael fully trained so his dad can see how the housework should be done. Oh. Charlie said. The following day, after completing his morning chores, Charlie donned his normal clothes and walked over to Mike's house. He rang the doorbell and waited. Mike's dad answered wearing a pair of comfy-looking casual pants, a sweatshirt and a pale blue tabard. Hello, Mr. Peters, is Mike in? Hello, Charlie, yes. Mrs. Peters replied. Mike, he hollered. Charlie's here, should I send him up? He asked, before turning to Charles and inviting him in. You know where to go, he said. Charles trotted up the stairs, Mike loitered on the landing. He didn't seem too keen to see Charlie, but wasn't in any way hostile. Your mum was round at ours last night. Charles said. Yeah, I know. Mike glumly replied. I think your mum wants to turn you into a housekeeper like me. Charles cautiously informed him. I know she does. Mike replied. I'm not keen on it though. I want a career, not a rota, he sighed. Yeah, me too. Charlie said. At least your mum's gonna let you do A-levels and go to university. Mine's made it perfectly clear that I won't even be going to college. Yeah, true. I've nothing against learning to do the housework. I help my dad often enough 'cause he's always behind. Mike replied. But Mum wants me to learn how to be a proper housekeeper, like you, he added. It's not so bad once you get used to it. Charles claimed. The uniform does help me focus, I guess. I try to wear it for as little time as possible, she said, smiling nervously. It's the makeup I could do without, that takes ages and I don't see the point of it. How long does it take? Mike asked. About 10 minutes I guess, then another 10 to remove it. That's not so bad. I was expecting something like half an hour. It took me at least that to begin with. The eyes are the hardest. Lipstick's the easiest. Charlie said. Has your mum said anything about me teaching you? No. Why? My mum mentioned it after your mum left last night. Mentioned what? Well, me teaching you. Teaching me what? Housekeeping or makeup? Both, I think. Charles hesitantly replied. Maybe it was just my mum thinking about how I could help, he added. Oh. Mike replied. I hope my mum doesn't expect me to wear a dress and makeup, he said. Dad doesn't, so it wouldn't be far if I had to. Well, I hope you're right, Mike. The way they were talking last night suggests that she might. Charles told his friend pretty much everything that had been said, but left out the details about his father being barely able to manage. Then when your mum left, my mum started saying that you could come round and watch me work and that I could show you how to do your makeup and stuff, he explained, adding, I'd prefer it if I wasn't involved. I'd rather keep my housekeeping and my friends separate. I was mortified when you called round yesterday morning. I know, sorry about that. Mum insisted that I came and I told her you wouldn't want to see me. Mike replied. Changing the subject, Mike asked Charlie if he had any plans for the rest of the afternoon. Not really, Charles replied, arching his back a little and pushing his hand into his waist. I've got a few more chores to do before tea time, then there's the dishes to wash and the kitchen to clean, and I can finally take my corset off. You wear a corset? Mike exclaimed. Charles nodded and said it's to protect his back and maintain his posture. I had no idea. Mike gasped. Can I see it? I'd rather you didn't, it is underwear and I'm not gonna show you my undies, Mike. Fair enough, soz. Mike bashfully replied. You wear one every day. Unless it's a school day. Charles said, before muttering something about not looking forward to actually leaving school. Shit, then it'll be every day, forever. Well, hopefully not forever, but for as long as I'm living at home. Charles glumly replied. It's not fair, just because my sisters are expected to do better than me, they don't have to do anything. Even when I'm not on duty, they expect me to fetch them drinks and fix them snacks, then clear up afterwards, he moaned. According to my dad, there's no such thing as off duty. Mike replied. You can say that again. Charles agreed, before saying that it's no so bad, providing you keep on top of the rota and constantly tailor it to maximize efficiency. I do get a few hours of me time in the afternoons and evenings, otherwise I wouldn't be here now, he said, checking his watch. Oh, he sighed, splaying his fingers. I've chipped my nail varnish. ~000. Later that day, as Charles was clearing up after supper, he overheard his mother on the phone to Francine. Oh he groaned to himself, hearing her excitedly suggesting that Michael could benefit from some time watching Charlie work. She went to suggest that he could also teach Michael to do his makeup, shave his legs and things like that. Oh God, he groaned. 2 days later, on the Wednesday, Charles finds himself doing exactly what he didn't want to do. He'd been up since 5:30 a.m., lacing himself into his corset and applying his makeup, donning his frock and pinny ready to start his chores for the day at 6 a.m. Mike was due at 8 a.m. and at precisely 7:55 a.m., as Charlie was clearing the breakfast table, the doorbell rang. No one ever answers the door these days unless Charles is out, so he stops what he's doing, dries his hands and answers the door. Hi, Mike. Charles gulped, before inviting his friend inside. Hiya. Mike nervously said as he quickly stepped inside. Mum made me wear this, he said, nervously looking down at his navy blue housekeeping dress and frilly white apron. You look okay. Charlie said. What's in the box? He asked, staring at the box tucked under Mike's arm. Oh, my shoes. Mike sheepishly said. Thankfully Mum didn't make me walk over in them, he added, removing the lid and revealing a pair of heeled Mary Janes. Glumly, he said that his mother insisted that he wore them when he arrived. Come through. Charlie said, inviting Mike to the kitchen and pulling out a chair for him. I'm just clearing up after breakfast, he said, resuming his chore. Hello, Michael. Marie said when she entered. Michael shyly returned the greeting as he fiddled with his buckles. I love your uniform. Marie smiled. Michael went bright red as he thanked her, before confessing that he's not keen on it. Charlie didn't like his at first either, but it does help. Yeah, Charlie was telling me. Mike shyly replied. By this point, he'd buckled his shoes. Charlie's mother suggested he stood up so she could have a proper look at him. Mike said as he stood. I'm not really used to heels. Well, you soon will be, Marie said as she looked him up and down. Haven't you got a headband? She asked. Mike shook his head. Maybe Charlie could lend you one of his, she suggested. You'll need makeup too. He's only watching me work, he doesn't need any makeup. Charles said. I know, but he needs to learn how to do it, and you're the best person to teach him. Well, I can't teach him whilst I'm doing my chores. True, his mother replied. Maybe give him a lesson when you've finished, she suggested, before asking Michael what time his mother's expecting him back. Tea time, Michael replied. Well, you can show him after lunch, Marie said to her son. Have you got my lunch? She asked. Charles handed his mother the packed lunch he'd prepared and Marie thanked him. She looked Michael up and down and made him blush when she described his socks as cute. Unlike Charlie, who wears a pair of white knee-high pop socks, Michael wears a pair of white pelerine ankle socks with frilly trim around the cuffs. You've shaved your legs too, she noticed, causing Mike to go crimson. Right, I'd better be off. I'll see you boys later, she said. Bye, Mum, Charles replied. Bye, Mrs. Jackson, Michael timidly said. Before actually leaving, Marie reminded Charlie to fetch one of his headbands for Michael, and suggested that Charlie also teaches his friend how to tie a nice neat bow, describing his current bow as looking a bit shabby. Sorry about her, Charles said once his mother had gone. You don't have to wear a headband if you don't want to. It won't make any difference. Mike gulped. A headband won't make me feel any more ridiculous than I already feel. You'll get used to it, Charlie assured as he washed the last few pots. Right. I'll just leave them to drain for a minute whilst we sort out your apron. What's wrong with it? Mike asked. I'll show you. Charles took his friend into the hallway and parked him in front of the mirror. Instead of just tying any old bow, you need to make sure that the tails are pretty much the same length, that the bow isn't too big and the hoops aren't hanging or twisted, Charlie explained, rettying Mike's apron so it's more like his own. There, he said. Mike claimed that the tails are too long when the bow is so small, but Charles said that the bow needs to be able to hold its own weight so it looks presentable and the length of the tails don't matter. Maybe your mum won't be quite so finicky as mine is, but I guess whilst you're here, it's best to adhere to my mum's standards. Yeah, I guess, Mike replied. But I think my mum's going to be just as finicky. I mean, look at my socks, they're horrendous. Yeah. I've got some like that, but Mum prefers me in knee socks, Charles replied. These aren't much better, he said, referring to his thin pop socks. They ladder really easily. The two boys spent a moment observing themselves in the large mirror. Charles in his charcoal grey frock and frilly white pinny, white headband and prettily painted face. Mike wears a navy blue frock with a frilly white apron and his unpainted face looks plain next to Charlie's. You won't mention this next week, will you? Mike asked. Nah, Charles replied. But they'll notice your legs in PE. Shit. Yeah. Mike sighed. Did you shave or use cream? Cream, Mike confessed. It really stunk, and stung. Yeah, it does. I prefer shaving these days, Charles replied. Well, given the choice I'd rather do neither but, he added. Mike moaned. So, what do you have to do next? He asked. Is the kitchen done? Charles needed to dry the dishes and put them away, then quickly clean the sink, wipe the draining board and worktops before quickly mopping the floor. Then it's upstairs to straighten the beds, gather the laundry, hoover the carpets, clean the bathrooms, dust the furniture and ornaments, wipe the windows if needed and check them for bird droppings. Do you want me to do anything? Mike asked as he simply stood by and observed as his schoolmate dusted, wiped and tidied one room after another. Nah, just watch. Charles replied. If it's not up to standard, Mum'll make me do it again anyway, and it's best to do it once and do it right, he explained before knocking on Emily's door before entering. You know Mike, he said, introducing his friend to his sister. Emily grinned as she looked him up and down. I love your dress, Michael, and those socks, very pretty. Bashfully, Mike thanked her. No makeup though. Emily added. No. Not yet. Mike gulped, before saying that Charlie's going to show him how to do it. He got a similar reception in Samantha's room. She grinned and giggled and belittled the boy who, being 15 years of age, is 4 years her senior, but considering his subservient attire, he feels every bit inferior to her. After quickly, swiftly and thoroughly tidying her bedroom, Charlie and Mike exit. I didn't realize your sisters were in. Mike grimaced. Well, it is the school holidays. Charlie replied. Think yourself lucky you don't have any. I spend more time tidying up after them than I do cleaning the rest of the house. Yeah, I guess. Mike agreed. After cleaning the entire first floor, including Charles' bedroom in which Mike was given a white Alice band to wear, Charles got on his knees and swept the stair carpet whilst also dusting the banister and balusters. The hallway itself is dusted, the mirror wiped, the doormat shaken outside, the floor is swept then mopped then dried, and after getting up of his knees, Charles quickly checks his reflection in the mirror and tidies his ruffles and bow. He tells Mike that it's a habit he's got into. Whenever he sees a mirror, he quickly checks his appearance to make sure he's up to standard. My dad's got it easy, all he wears is a tabard. Mike says as Charlie reapplies his lipstick. I wish I only had a tabard. Charles sighed as he put the lippy back into the pocket on his apron. Me too. Mike gulped. After tidying the lounge and dining room and making his sisters a mid-morning snack, Charles began separating the laundry into lights, darks, colors, and delicates before putting the first load on. You'll need to time your washing machine so you know how long each cycle takes, and check the time when you turn it on, he explains. Non-fast coloreds takes about an hour and 10, a white wash is closer to 2 hours. The sooner you get the clothes out, the easier they are to iron. Charles tells his unwilling apprentice as he dumps the delicates into a sink and begins to hand wash them. The first loads of laundry is removed from the washing machine and separated. Some go in the dryer, some get hung on the washing line. You can stay inside if you want. Charlie suggested as he picked up the washing basket and opened the back door. I hated having to go outside at first, he added, before saying that it doesn't really bother him now because all the neighbors who might see him wearing his domestic dress, frilly pinny, and high-heeled shoes, have seen him, and on numerous occasions. Mike watched from the back door whilst Charlie hung out the laundry. The tails of his perfect bow fluttered in the breeze as he crouched and stood, hanging each item and securing them with pegs, bath towels, hand towels, bed sheets, and pillowcases. It's clear that Charles has done this hundreds of times before as he takes advantage of the breeze, swinging the huge bed sheets over the line, making sure they never touch the ground, spreading them out and pegging them in place before crouching and grabbing the next item. He walks effortlessly and elegantly in his heels as he returns whilst Mike stands uncomfortably in his. Do you do that every day? He asked. Unless it's raining. Charlie replied. Yes, of course. Mike realized, before suggesting that it might be quicker if he bent rather than crouched. Not so easy when you're wearing a corset. Charles replied as he began quickly sorting more laundry. Oh yeah. I'd forgotten about that. Mike said, feeling somewhat stupid. I take it you're not. Charles asked, glancing at Mike's midriff. Mike shook his head and said that his mother can't decide whether to get him a proper corset or a posture girdle. The girdle sounds more bearable, he figured. But I'd rather have neither. Dad doesn't have to wear one. I had a girdle for a bit, they're really tight, Charles replied. At least with a corset you can lace it so it's taut rather than tight, plus, Corsets provide more support than girdles, which is the whole point, I guess. Charles explained that his mother took him a courtier for a proper fitting and claimed that off-the-peg corsets aren't quite so comfortable. Maybe comfortable isn't the right word, Charles added as he pressed his hands into his waist. But I prefer it to my girdle. It must take ages to lace it though, Mike said. 5 minutes. Charles shrugged before quickly checking the items in the tumble dryer. It's no different to tying your shoelaces really, only they're behind your back. Mike glanced down at his shoes and recalls how fiddly the buckles were. Why do we have to wear heels? He asked. The only reason that Charles could suggest is that heels are just part of the traditional housekeeper image. Similarly, there's no real reason for them to wear dresses. They're just part of the look. Flat shoes would make more sense, Charles reckoned. But I quite like being a bit taller. I'm petrified that I'll twist my ankle or something. It's weird being this high up. You'll get used to it. How did I know you were going to say that? Mike dryly retorted as Charles sorted and folded a big pile of socks. Can I help? He offered. Sure. Charlie smiled. I know it sounds sad, but I quite like sorting the socks, he said. It's like a game of Snap but with socks, pairing the colors and patterns, and if you finish with no oddies, you win, he smiled. By the time the socks had all been sorted, the first load came out of the tumble dryer and the second load went in. The quicker you get stuff out of the dryer, the easier it is to iron, Charles explained as he quickly sorted and folded the bundle. And some things don't need ironing at all, he added as he placed a blouse on a hanger. Mike was impressed by the way that Charles works. But he wasn't inspired. Charles doesn't stop for a moment, even when talking. He's either folding something, wiping something, straightening something, tidying something, not a second is wasted. The prospect of doing what Charlie does, day in day out from crack of dawn until everything's done, is a daunting one. Charlie glances at the clock on the wall and since it's nearing noon, it's time he checked if his sisters want some lunch. Surely they should make their own lunch if you're doing all this, Mike quizzed. Yeah, it'd be nice if they lifted a finger, but they don't, Charles grumbled. Shall I wait here? Mike asked as Charles headed to his sister's rooms. You can put the kettle on, Charles suggested. Mike watched Charlie trot into the hallway. The bow on the back of his pinny floated behind him and his heels clacked loudly against the tiled floor. Charles paused briefly in front of the hallway mirror and checked his bow, adjusting it slightly before trotting up the stairs. Mike stepped over to the sink and paid particular attention to the sound his own heeled shoes make. There's no way to walk quietly in them. Charles returned as the kettle bubbled to a boil. Do you want soup or a sandwich? He offered.